welcome to another edition of the Amusement Warehouse podcast. Today we have with us Mr. Safety, Avery Wheelock from the Worldwide Safety Group, who I just found out is also not Mr. Technology. He's just Mr. Safety. Avery, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't know. Technology is a wonderful thing when it works, but I don't know. These newfangled gadgets that should work. I don't know. Anyways.
That's great. So
the
safety world,
can't work an iPhone.
The safety world is a very important thing to our industry, obviously, from parks to water parks to carnivals and all in between. And you work with just about all of them. What sparked your interest in safety? How'd you come to be in the safety industry?
Well, I got involved with NARSO over 20 years ago.
And explain to people what NARSO is.
I'm sorry. NARSO is a National Association of Amusement Ride Safety Officials. And it's an organization that holds annual safety seminars and teaches people how to be an amusement ride inspector. And there's an annual school every year. And then there's also little schools that are supported by NARSO throughout the country. And you can go get educated as far as amusement ride safety and things like that. So that's what got me into doing the safety, but being born and raised in the carnival industry, I'm familiar with the equipment and wanted to, when I got out of playing carnival, I got into doing stuff for the insurance company to inspect carnivals.
Now, your carnival started with what? With your grandfather had the show first?
Yeah, so Wheelock Rides, based out of Syracuse, New York, of course, started the first amusement ride was purchased by my grandfather in 1945, an old Condorman Ferris wheel. In fact, that is on display at the Carnival Museum in Gibsonton, Florida.
Nice.
So it's there. So my family goes back long before that, before purchasing rides. We're in the cookhouse business and selling peanuts back in the 20s.
Wow. I've been studying a lot of ride history lately, and there really weren't a lot of rides before like 1930, the times you're talking about. It's basically a Ferris wheel and a merry-go-round, and really the rides didn't really hit big until the 40s and 50s and really, the 80s before you got rides like you have now.
Yeah, the way I understand it, back in the day in the 40s, if you had a Ferris wheel, a merry-go-round, and a chairplane, which is a swing ride, that was your carnival.
Right. Plus the shows.
Yeah, and all the shows and the side shows and the girly shows and all that sort of stuff. But upstate New York, just the Fireman's Field Days and the little county fairs, you had those kind of rides, and there's still, they also had the old steel pedal cars. I've heard stories of my grandfather used to charge a dime, and you could go on a platform and pedal these steel pedal cars, and for a short period of time, and then the biggest addition and 4th of July weekend of 1946 was a brand new chairplane from Smith & Smith Manufacturing got delivered in Weedsport, New York to Wheelock Rides.
I think he told me one time too that when he took delivery of the Scrambler, it was like a national holiday or something like that. It's like huge, right?
Yeah, that was August of '78. My grandfather bought a trailer-mounted Scrambler, Mr. Sullivan, and they came, and it was delivered in Sodus, New York, and he arranged for the high school band, the marching band, they had a parade down through the town of Sodus and pulled it on the fairgrounds and set it up, and the marching band was the first ones to ride the ride.
That's pretty cool. They're big events. I mean, they're big. It was
a
big thing to bring a ride to a small town in those days.
Yeah. I was 9 years old then but I still remember it. And in fact, we just come across some pictures the other day of Mr. Sullivan had taken and given to my he hired a professional photographer. But anyways, and then presented them to my grandfather.
Now later on, when you had rides yourself, were you disappointed they didn't have parades every time you bought a ride?
Yeah, no, they don't have parades. All they do is they got parades to the bank to make deposits, to make payments. That's about it.
That's great. So
So,
you worked for the
but
family business for how long were you in the business with your dad eventually took over?
yeah, I worked when I got out of high school. My dream was to own a Flying Bob's, and that's was the first ride purchase. I had concessions and games and that kind of stuff, but anyways, bought a Flying Bob's and then had to go south in order to pay for that. So traveled with Amusements America and then Riehofer shows and did various events and worked all through the winter in Florida and stuff like that to pay for that. And then just kept adding more and more rides. And then finally, my dad told me, "You need to go book your own spots. You got too much stuff." So went off and did my own thing and
Nice.
but anyway, so that then started going south and transitioned into a bunch of different things, and then life happens and you change directions, and I got more into doing the um, yeah, like I said, went working for a company that did business for the insurance companies because I was always curious about it, and I remember asking at IAPA one year, how do you get involved in doing inspection work? And I got introduced to a fellow that worked with a company, and I started doing moonlighting in the wintertime, doing stuff for them.
Because you have the knowledge. I mean, when you so many times, and I don't want to disparage all inspectors, a lot of them are great, but when you get in places where like say Virginia or where you played before, where the inspector isn't used to seeing a lot of amusement rides, a lot of times the carnival owner or the amusement park might be educating the inspector a little bit more than the other way around because they're more familiar with things that go on. So you're probably a great candidate to get involved in the inspection business because of the practical knowledge you had as well as the intellectual knowledge you had.
Yeah, and I've done that, and that's kind of been my mission, I guess, if you could say, use that term, is to educate people. Um, for years I've shared my knowledge, and you get a new inspector that in certain states they only see amusement rides a couple weeks out of the summer, and they're coming out and putting their name on it and putting stickers on it for you, and so you want to make sure that everything's right, and there's a lot of uh, there's not a carnival or amusement park out there in our industry that wants to potentially harm somebody. So, they try to educate their employees and all that. Well, I try to do the same thing for amusement park employees or inspectors that come out, and that's been one of my things, and that's something why I've been so involved with NARSO. Um, is being on the education committee and being on the certification committee, taking over a few years back the primary classes so that the new inspectors that are coming to the school for the first time or even coming back for refreshers are getting the proper information, um, and know where to go find that information if they need to go look up something. So that's really something I've tried to do. And as you know, I write safety corner articles for the amusement warehouse every month and try to share one little bit of piece of information that might make our industry safer or better.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, so you encourage all. Do most of the state inspectors go to NARSO to get certified and learn, or is that by and large a lot of people go? And I know a lot of carnivals and a lot of amusement park people are sending their people now to NARSO to get educated and learn about safety.
Well, NARSO's the primary school for state certified inspectors. There's other schools out there. There's the Ames
Mm-hmm.
Amusement Industry Manufacturers and Suppliers Safety Seminar. They do a lot more gearing towards amusement park operations and things like that. There's several different schools. One that I promote all the time, the Burbacks out in Salem, Oregon. There, they have a safety seminar, the Northwest Showman Safety Seminar, in February, and I encourage every carnival employee or carnival to send their employees to that school because it's actually geared just specifically for the carnival employees to get trained on safety. So that's another school. it's hard. I volunteer several weeks a year just to help spread education. In fact, next week I'll be out in Las Vegas for the World Water Park Association, instructing a class on indoor water park inspection. So I try to give back as much as I can, and I don't claim to know anything about anything. I just know a few things because I've been doing this a little while. And as you said earlier, we look at all kinds of stuff. And my team at Worldwide Safety Group, we look at parks and carnivals and family fun centers all over the country and sometimes around the world. But so
that so just to put it in perspective, though, how safe are carnivals and amusement parks? I mean, you hear people say, "Oh, I wouldn't go on that ride," or "Oh, I wouldn't go over here, go over there." But compared to your things you do every single day, how safe are amusement rides in this country?
Well, I think it's a proven fact that you're safer on a ride at the county fair than you are on the ride to the county fair. There's auto accidents all the time. There's bicycle accidents all the time. We don't hear too much about an incident on an amusement ride, but when we do, it's always national news because something happened. A ride malfunctioned, so they say. People were trapped on the lift hill of a roller coaster at an amusement park, and well, no, they weren't trapped. The ride did exactly what it's supposed to do. It detected a fault and stopped something from happening, or hopefully prevented something from happening. But I get asked that question a lot. We see these carnivals that they throw them rides together up overnight and take them down and move to the next town, and how safe can that be? And I think it's a misconception because those rides that are taken apart every week, they get to see the internal components of them every week. So if something's worn, it gets identified a lot faster than, our amusement parks in this country are great, but those rides aren't coming apart every day. They have extensive testing that gets done. Excuse me, that gets done, but some of those components don't come apart very often. So I think the carnival side is a little more safer in my personal opinion, but industry wide, our entire industry is very safe compared to the travel industry or the bicycling community or motorcycle. I love to ride my motorcycle, but it's so darn dangerous because nobody's paying attention. It seems like they're playing on their cell phones instead of watching out for the bike that's turning in front of them. So I think our industry is very, very safe.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to bring it, because you always think about, like, I always draw the analogy a lot of times with airplanes and cars. Flying is infinitely more safer than riding in a car, but God forbid if there is an accident once in a while, it grabs a lot of headlines and it becomes a big story. But it's still, when you really calm down and you think about it rationally, you're much safer flying than you are driving. So same thing with like you said, the county fair. It's safer to be on the ride than it is to the ride to the fair. And it's not just a little bit more dangerous; it's a lot more dangerous. I mean, statistically speaking, your chances of getting hurt are much, much higher. So, getting that out there. But then there's also just the emotion of oh my gosh, because the rides are made to make you feel, I guess, unsafe or have a thrill or whatever you want to call it. Not that safety really comes into it. It's just to have a thrill, like you're in danger when you're riding a coaster, you're going to fly off or something's going to happen. That's kind of part of the ride. So that sticks in your psyche a little bit and makes people nervous, I guess, to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's, everybody thinks that, getting on a ride and there's people that go on roller coasters and they'll deliberately leave their lap restraint up just a little bit. So they call it getting airtime on these big roller coasters for the thrill that they could potentially slide out of that seat. And I don't know, they're like trying to scare themselves, I guess. There's thrill seekers like that. And then there's other things that, legitimately can happen. We talk about safety at amusement parks, and, one of the things that you'll see every once in a while there'll be a train, a roller coaster. We call it a train, but a train stops somewhere, and of course they blame it on the ride, but they don't think about the patron that snuck their cell phone on or didn't take their hat off or something like that, and they come flying off and gets wedged in the wheel. These railroad trains that are going all over the country, when they hit something, it just demolishes it and it flies off the tracks. But a roller coaster, if your hat comes off or something like that, it can wedge in. That's why the signage is up there to tell people not to do those kind of things. But it always makes national news when somebody was a rebel and kept their hat, and it blew off and got wedged between the wheels and slowed the train enough that it didn't make the next loop. Well, now it's instantly the amusement company's fault, or the amusement park, or the inspector, or the manufacturer, or something like that. And actually just some unique individual that wanted to do something they shouldn't have done. But that stuff should get some publicity. I think we should be able to hold those people accountable instead of going after the inspector or the maintenance man that worked on that ride, because it had nothing to do with them. That's just one of my thoughts.
Well, and I think that kind of strikes something else I was thinking about is, I think most people think of an accident as being like the ride breaking, but really most injuries or accidents or whatever are not the ride breaking. There's behaviors and things that go on, that cause problems, right? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that and why
Absolutely.
that's a focus so much of inspection rather than seeing something wrong, which is a tiny, tiny percentage of the accidents, but what's the real problem?
Right. So there are going to be, amusement rides are machinery. It's just like your automobile. It's just like, your pickup truck or whatever. Machinery is going to break. You can have the lug nuts come loose and that kind of stuff. It's machinery. It can break down. The alternator can go out and you lose power out on the highway at night or something like that. Amusement rides are very similar. If they're maintained, like you try to maintain your automobile, well, they should function and operate properly for a long time. So the chances and amusement rides are inherently safe because they're over-engineered so much that the fail ratio or fail rate of the component is so over manufactured or whatever that the components are, that they're not going to fail. That's why, when I come out as an insurance inspector and I tell everybody to put up these safety signs, and the manufacturer says that you're required to have this sign and that sign that tells people to keep their hands inside, don't stick your hands in the wheels of the giant wheel because it's going to run your fingers over, and you got to put up all this stuff because people do stupid things. Well, majority of incidents on amusement rides are patron related because somebody, again, tried to stand up while the ride was turning, stuck their arms outside, stuck their head outside, stuck their foot out, didn't sit still, sit upright, and all that. That's when people get hurt, when they start doing silly things or horse playing. And these I don't know anything about these this TikTok something or other that people are making these videos of doing stupid things on amusement rides. I got in trouble. I teach a lot of classes at NARSO, and I say when people do stupid things, you're out thin the herd, and you're not allowed to say that. You're not supposed to, but because it makes our industry look bad. But sometimes I wish there was a way to prevent some of these idiots or unique individuals, I should say, from doing things like that. And the only way we can do that is to have the operators paying attention and tell, hey, stop doing that, or kick them off the ride, or put up signs that nobody reads, but lawyers and inspectors. But anyway, so yeah, it is true. Most things that happen on a ride is because somebody did something they weren't supposed to do. If you get on a Ferris wheel, you're not going to come out of it. It's going to just go round and round and up and down and all that. But if you start rocking the seat or opening up the door and leaning forward or something like that, well, then you're going to get hurt and hopefully not hurt somebody else while you getting hurt. So I don't know. There's lots of different things like that happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, when you look at like how much, I mean, we're inspecting and inspecting and looking at all those things for something to, again, to break, when a lot of things are because people are sort of misbehaving when they're on the ride. What steps are you taking to sort of mitigate? I mean, I know the easy thing is to inspect because that's, sort of definable. You can look at the ride and do your thing, but watching all these people, as you know, we ride millions and millions of people in the industry every year, and being able to pay attention to them and do what they're doing. Like cell phones are got to be kind of a menace going on now. Do most rides not allow cell phones at all, or what do we do and how do we address that?
Well, what do we do is it goes into employee training. Train them and have signage that helps back it up, because some places, they're using 16-year-olds to run kiddie rides, 18-year-olds to run major rides, and the people that they're trying to tell they can't do something are going to try to intimidate that employee and say, well, I've always had my cell phone with me, or I've always worn a hat or something like that. Um, we've got to train the frontline employees not to allow it to happen. Say, I'm sorry, you're just not going to get on this ride. Or if they see somebody doing something, misbehaving, stop the ride. Some people have the 3 times and you're out. Well, the third time or the second time could be too late. Somebody's rocking a seat on the Ferris wheel, kick them off the first time. Don't give them the second opportunity, because if they fall out of the seat, they could fall down and hit somebody else and knock somebody else out of a seat. I was a young kid when a gentleman come out of a seat at the Ferris wheel on the New York State Fairgrounds when I was a little kid, and got to see that firsthand. I knocked another person out, and the guy was hanging from the center of the Ferris wheel by his foot in the cables. Those sights you'll never forget, and that's something that our new frontline employees need to be taught. What can happen if they don't make people behave? Because everybody in our society wants to misbehave or do something that's funny or conceived as funny, but it's actually harmful to other people and themselves potentially. Um, so what can be done is training, 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 training. I know I preach it all the time, but because the saying is you can't fix stupid. Well, we can try to prevent stupid from hurting somebody else that's not stupid. That's I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but that's my opinion, and sometimes I'm a little opinionated.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And when you go to training, so a lot of your business, I guess, is conducting training with, whether it's amusement parks or carnivals or fairs or whoever, training the employees how to recognize things and prevent them, because that's where, I guess, uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where you can make the biggest impact on preventing, sort of small, like, patrons from doing crazy things, basically, or not even crazy, but just silly things.
Yeah, absolutely. We get hired by various different companies to come out and do, we call it internal audits, not only for their equipment but for their employees. I recently did a um, operational audit at a small little amusement park, and shot a video of an employee not paying attention, and then went and asked to see their training documents. And then we uncover that, well, they signed all the stuff but they forgot to date the paperwork. So there's all kinds of things, and I know we've discussed it in our safety articles about training documentation. But yeah, that's a big part of, well, not a big part, I guess it is, for Worldwide Safety Group, is to go out and do those kind of audits of the employees, and just wander around and observe things, and then make notes, and then try to use that as a learning experience for for those employees and for future employees. Watch them as they're loading a roller coaster. Are they double checking the restraints? Are they actually going down seat by seat and looking at those kind of things? Or are they just saying, okay, yep, everything's closed, we got green lights all across the screen, dispatch? You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that they're verifying it, and the only way to do that is to have audits. Now, a lot of companies have their own internal people that kind of try to watch themselves, but having a third party outsider come in that none of the help or employees recognize, um, you can see some things where they might be getting lax at doing their job, because a lot of this is monotonous for the employees. They're on a ride all day, or maybe they cycle out, or they have different shifts that they work at different positions, but it can be very monotonous and very they get accustomed to just getting in a habit of maybe not doing everything they're supposed to. So training them to look for those kind of things and make sure they're doing it right is something that we do, and that companies all over this country do internally anyways. So that's what we try to do to make a little bit of a difference in the public's perception or public experience at a park or a carnival or a fair.
Yeah, training's so important. When you first got into safety and you started doing, parks and some big parks and water parks, did you have to teach yourself a little bit of things you weren't quite as familiar with? But I guess in general they kind of work the same way. But there's some tricks to, or not tricks, but there's some differences to some of the larger rides or the coasters, say, than other pieces of equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up moving tilt-a-whirls and scramblers and spiders and merry-go-rounds and all the stuff that I could tell you every single part and piece between them. But then I remember one of my first jobs was at a large amusement park out in California, working on a B&M roller coaster, and then also on a big wooden roller coaster with Philadelphia toboggan trains. And I didn't know anything about that. I knew about little roller coasters, but so reading manuals and being taught, I was lucky enough to have some great teachers. One person that taught me an awful lot is Mr. Tony Rossi, who I believe is now the maintenance director at Hershey Park. I worked with him for a long time, and he taught me everything he taught me about wooden roller coasters, and told me I would see at some point in the 20 some years since I have seen. But you've got to work with people that are experienced in that and have a lot of knowledge in it. And now I'm helping teach people about those things that I was taught years ago. You got to learn from experience, because you can't read it all in a book. That's one of the misconceptions. Some of these state inspectors, they know what they know out of a book, but they've actually never walked a wooden roller coaster from end to end, or walked every wooden roller coaster in the country, or a good majority of them, like we have. So yeah, you got to get trained by somebody that's already done it. It's like any industry. You can't just jump in and take over the controls of a large crane. You got to go get trained how to pick up and what your limits are and things like that. Well, it's the same thing as inspecting a wooden roller coaster or a steel coaster or anything like that. Learning about how many clicks on a B&M roller coaster, the restraint system. What are you listening for? And if you're off by a couple clicks, well, they put the dogs in backwards. Those are little things that you'll learn just by doing and by working with people that have done it for a long, long time. I find that I learn a whole lot more by going into a maintenance department, kind of play dumb a little bit, and just ask a lot of questions, because everybody wants to help show something or teach somebody something, and you learn a whole lot more by playing dumb than you do by playing a know-it-all. If you walk in there with your chest all puffed up saying I'm the inspector and I know everything, well, you're going to miss an awful lot, and you're never going to learn anything. I try to learn something every day, and like many of the folks in our industry do. So stay humble and ask questions. That's the only way I learned, and that's the way I tell all my guys and all the people that I have interactions with, ask questions. So it's all about teaching and learning and training. Like, everything seems to rotate back to training, but that's so important in our industry. Training, because they're not beating the doors down to get into this business to start either playing carnival or inspecting carnivals. It doesn't seem to be, it's a lot of hard work and anyways. So training.
What about water parks? Water parks pose some real interesting things to look at, because like on a carnival, the rides like a moonwalker, the things that aren't where you're strapped in and it goes for so long and then they let you out, or a slide or something like that, are the most dangerous. But the water parks, to me, and I'm not that all that familiar with all the water parks, but everything's a variable. People are sliding and they're moving and they're spinning and they're not strapped in somewhere. So that poses a whole new set of safety dangers, doesn't it? Or safety concerns, I guess, is a better question.
Yeah, it's a different set of things to look at, a different set of variables, I guess. Are they good swimmers? Are they in the deep end of the pool? But again, water parks, we look at so many slides and looking at fiberglass, fiberglass, when you're looking for sharp edges that could possibly hurt somebody. But the most important thing in water parks, I think, is again the training of the lifeguards, training of the guys that are maintaining the equipment, the pumps, the filtration systems, and all that. If you've got filters that are clogged up, well, it might be restricting the water flow. And some of these slides and these slide bowls that people go in, whether they are in a tube or by themselves, if the water flow is not correct, and the lubrication is not correct on the fiberglass, they'll hit a dry spot and they could flip somebody over or flip a tube over and dump people out and all those kind of things that we don't think about, but those are all very, very important things that make the working of a water park, whether it be indoor or outdoor or whatever, so important. And then also the water quality. There's so many waterborne illnesses now that we don't even think about. Every water park encourages you to go shower off. I know when I was a kid and in school, we go to swim, you had to shower before you got in the pool because you don't want all those germs and stuff that are on everybody's bodies in the big pool. And that's a huge.
Avery left us. Just waiting on Avery to return. He had some technical difficulties, I think.
Are you there?
Yeah, there he is. Oh, did you drop your phone?
I'm sorry. I don't know what. Well, I'm not sure. I got a call and it somehow deleted this thing.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Water. So contaminants in the water is something that we need to be aware of. But there are so many different things to look at in a water park, like you said.
The other thing I was thinking about. The other thing I was thinking about that you don't get on most other mechanical rides is regulation of how many people can go on, and those stop points. You got to make sure the person's passed so they don't hit each other, and that's an employee regulated thing that's got to happen. The ride doesn't do it on its own, so you can't make sure too many people go down the slide at one time, or the distance between them, and all those things are really active measures they got to take when they're operating. They got to really pay attention.
Yeah. So again, it's in the training. The slides will have a clear line. That's why you have a lifeguard at the bottom of the slide and one at the top, a dispatcher. Some of the newer slides actually have photo eyes in the tubes, so that when someone leaves the top, it sets off it sets the top light to red, and it doesn't change to green, so they can dispatch another person until they actually clear the end of the tube, coming out into either the pool or to the end of the slide. There's photo sensors, so they'll get a dispatch light at the top. Mm-hmm. Other parks or slides, they're actually controlled by the person at the bottom of the slide. They have to push a button that gives them the green light at the top. If it's a slide set up where they can have a direct line of sight, they'll give the thumbs up at the bottom, and the top guy or girl can dispatch another person. So, yeah, that's very important because you don't want people running into each other, getting stuck in the tube or in the slide or something like that. One of the things that we don't think about a lot, and I've noticed at some of the water parks that we go to, is the inner tubes that people are riding on. They'll sometimes deflate, or they'll get a
Mm.
small leak or something, and that can be very dangerous if the tube is not at the right pressure. It could give more resistance or whatever, or catch in the slide in the fiberglass somewhere, and not have have the right flow, or have the right speed that it's supposed to be going down the slide. So those are all kind of things that we look at. Of course, you look at structure again, and look into chemical handling areas. We do a lot of that for the internal stuff. Make sure they've got all their personal protective gear for employee safety and things like that. But on the patron side, um, also a lot of companies or manufacturers now requiring scales, a weight limit scale at the top. Now, typically, it doesn't have a readout and show you how much you weigh. It just gives you a green light or a red light. We don't need Miss Norbert. I weigh 175. How you doing? We don't have to have the employee take their word for it. They can look and they get a green light or a red light. If you get a red light, well, somebody's too big to go, or they need to ride in a separate tube or something like that. So those are all things. And again, it goes back to training, 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 training. But there are so many things that we look at, whether it be for injury-related sharp edges or things like that, or lifeguard training. Who are they using to certify their lifeguards? What program are they using, and how often are they checked, and where's their documentation? All that kind of stuff is things that we look at in water parks.
And most of their employees are kids. I mean, they're younger, which doesn't make it bad or good. It's just something to think about. It's not like they're, 20-year employees moving a piece of equipment or something like that. You got kids who come and go every summer, but I guess by and large they do a really good job because the industry as a whole is pretty safe, is it not?
Yes, yeah. Again, and it all comes back to training. There's really good management at the majority of these amusement parks or water parks, and they've got good training for their lifeguards, and that's the most important thing. Our ride operator is pushing the green button while the lifeguard's standing there making sure that somebody's not underwater, and their eyes, and that they're doing their scans of the water, and all that is so important. And it is hard to get some of these lifeguards. They're young kids, and they're wanting to have fun too, and their friends are playing in the water, and sometimes they might get distracted. But that goes back to training and oversight. You got to have oversight in anything in our industry and in our world, actually. But those lifeguards, they've got to have somebody watching to make sure that they continue to do their job, because when they stop doing their job, that's when somebody could get seriously hurt.
Yes. Moving on to the carnival side of things a little bit, each state has a different set of rules or guidelines, or some really not much at all. Maybe just an insurance inspection or something like that. So it runs the gamut from you need to be inspected at every setup, or periodically, or once a season, or some just require, say, your insurance inspection or something like that. And this is always like made me think about how it actually makes me think about how safe the industry is, because you have places, like I said, that don't have regular state inspectors that come and inspect. Yet you would think if rides were dangerous in some way, you'd see a giant discrepancy between those states that inspect every single week, those that have a once a year insurance inspection or something like that. But it's really not the case, is it? I mean, they're pretty equal. You don't see a big difference between the two of them, do you?
No. Again, our industry is inherently safe because the equipment that we're operating is inherently safe. It's the patron error is the typical reason for things. And we are licensed or authorized or approved, or whatever term that each third party state calls it to operate or to inspect in those states. There's lots of states that have state inspectors that come out, and they'll either come out every setup, or they'll come out annually and check things, and they might periodically inspect. And then there's several states that that just use a third party person like myself that pays a license fee, or in some states there is not a fee. It's just registering and showing that you have credentials to perform those inspections. But you don't hear a lot of incidents happening in states that aren't heavily regulated. It's just our industry, again, as I said, is just inherently safe. So,
and for those people that are being sort of cynical and saying, well, that's because nobody catches them or something like that. I mean, an accident is reportable, right? In every state that there's if you have an actual accident, it's reportable, right?
Well, kind of. Some states don't have and I'm not up on all the reporting things, so I could not speak entirely accurately on that. Some states, even if there is an incident that has state regulations, if it's not where someone was transported,
right,
they're not required to report it. Some states, even if they are transported and they don't require an overnight stay, they're not required to report it to the state. So
and that's
there's
their
a lot
way
of
of
things that
judging whether. Sorry, that's a way they're judging whether or not it's a serious accident or not, and that if you got a scrape, if you bruise your knee in the slide or something, and they take you to the hospital and they put some Neosporin on it or something and let you go, then it's not a reportable incident. But if you broke your leg or something pretty serious and you had to stay overnight, or God forbid were injured more seriously, it would be an overnight stay and it would be a reportable incident everywhere, I would think, right?
Yes. Well, every state has different things. Well, in states that don't have regulation, there's nobody to report it to. See what I'm saying? There's not a regulatory agency that's governing those rides or giving them permits to operate. Now, there's been recent years, more and more states have added some sort of an inspection, just to have some sort of regulation, or in some cases just to collect another fee, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But so anyways, there's every state is different, and if you're operating in different states, I just say know your regulations, know when something's reportable or not reportable, but you always have to report it to your insurance company. So and you have to have insurance to operate, anywhere you go. But
that's what a lot of people don't realize too, with the insurance companies, and what a sort of a guideline they are for people about safety, is that if you have an incident or a couple of incidents or something wrong, they'll drop your insurance. You won't be able to get insurance. It's not like you could go get car insurance. You could go to 50 different companies. There's only a few, and if you're not a good operator, you're not going to have insurance and not be able to operate. I mean, it's pretty much a self-regulating thing in a lot of ways, because they just won't take you. You won't be allowed to operate.
Right. Yeah, there, and the people that shouldn't be operating or can't get insurance shouldn't be operating anyways, because they're affecting our industry.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance rates are extremely high as it is because of all these billboards that are on the interstate telling, hey, you think you got hurt, call me, I'll get you some money. Unfortunately, our society has turned to sue happy, and that has affected everything. So it's harder and harder. So the insurance companies got to be more and more careful of who they insure, and they don't want those bad operators. And for the most part, all the bad operators have gone out of business. I think the pandemic pretty much got rid of most of them that were hanging on. But so pretty much everybody that's out there is committed to making this work and do the best they can and put on a good show and a safe show and all that. and then are insurable.
If you're a patron and you're
my
coming to a park or a water park or a carnival or something else, what are some like simple tips you should look for to make sure that, I mean, obviously they're not inspectors, but what can a patron see or look for to know that the place they're at is probably well run or not well run?
Well, just watching the operation. Um, they always say don't put a child on a ride until after you've stood there and watched it operate, so you know what it does. But if you're just walking around, um, first impressions are everything. It doesn't matter what industry or what, if you're walking onto a fairgrounds and it's, the parking lot's got piles of trash everywhere, and they're just not maintaining their parking lots. And then you get on the grounds and it's the same thing. And then the rides look like, they haven't been painted in several years. And, the light bulbs aren't working and things like that. Well, if they're neglecting to replace a few light bulbs, and are they neglecting to replace key components that keep the stuff, operating properly? Just visual appearance. I tell people that, look at stuff. If it looks bad, well, then you might want to stand there and watch it a little bit longer. If it doesn't fall apart, well, you got a good shot. It ain't gonna fall apart while you're on it. But I mean, that's kind of doesn't happen. But that's a joking answer. But just observe things. Is all I can say. Because there are people that take great pride in their equipment, and that it's got fresh paint and it's got every single light bulb is burning, and the equipment looks good. The employees are clean shaven and well in uniform, and everything is nice. Well, that's probably a pretty good operation. The ones that don't have uniforms and they're wearing cutoff shirts and whatever, that they're in front of kids. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wearing a cutoff shirt, but an employee in front of the public probably should not be in that sort of a uniform. Those are all kinds of things. First impressions, again, is my answer. So,
Gotcha. The way things look and the way they're conducting themselves, and generally, if cosmetics are neglected, you can draw the inference that maybe maintenance is being neglected as well, or at least should be a concern of yours anyway.
yeah, that's true. But for the public, now for the inspector, if you get on the grounds and you see, well, things haven't been painted, or this and that doesn't look that well, um, but the ride could function just properly, and
Yeah.
everything, all the key components could be in good shape and be well maintained. They don't have a shop that they can take pieces in and completely refurbish. There's some carnivals that might have some bad looking equipment, or rough looking equipment, I guess you would say, and it could be the most mechanically sound equipment anywhere.
But
So
it's got to give you a little pause
that,
though when you walk up and you see things don't look so great. It's somewhere in your mind you got to go, oh, I wonder how this thing is maintained, because it's got to
exactly
be a little piece of what you're thinking.
Yeah, I've had that conversation. I've had that conversation with a few inspectors, and say, well, listen, we're not here to look at the prettiness of it. Is it put together right? Is the components right? And does it pass inspection component wise? And does it operate and function properly? And if all those are yes, then it's a go. It passes. So
yeah, because as you say, the ride is inherently safe. I mean, how safe it is pretty incredible, actually, with the billions of rides that are taken every year, and in the carnival industry, it's rare to hear about a fatality of some kind. I think on average is maybe one every other year or something like that. The last however many years I studied it, so it's a very, very rare thing. And when you look at how many rides are taken, I read a statistic one time that more people are transported to the hospital for playing pool than being hurt on amusement rides. So it's like billiards pool. It's a very, very safe thing, but it can be, people are scared of it for whatever reason, just because it is a thrill and it is a good time, and you're being tossed around and doing all the things you're doing. One of the things that
Right.
I think might be sort of untouched on your side of the business is you starting to inspect a lot of fairs, right? A lot of fairs are now hiring you to do a comprehensive look at the grounds and fairs and festivals and places like that, and look at things not just ride wise, but trip and fall hazards and wires and whatever else things might come up. Are you doing a lot of that business now?
Yeah. We do multiple fairs. We just finished pre-opening inspection at the Virginia State Fair, or the State Fair of Virginia, rather, in Doswell. In a couple of weeks, we'll be at the North Carolina State Fair for the fair. I mean, I've got guys down in Jackson, Mississippi right now, but we're there for the carnival, doing pre-open inspections. But yeah, for doing actual fair grounds safety and things like that, that's part of our contract, at a couple of state fairs that we do that. And we also do a lot of insurance inspections of grounds. And if the insurance company insures the fairgrounds, we'll go in and go through the buildings and look for potential exposures, whether it be a vibrating fan in the cattle barn that's got covered with dust, or water hoses and extension cords running every which way in the animal barns, or out on the grounds, unsecured propane tanks or CO2 cylinders on soda machines, that kind of stuff. That there's not really anybody that's looking at those kind of things. The rides get inspected thoroughly. The food, as far as the health department is concerned, those generally get looked at pretty good to make sure they're not, the freezers are all working properly and the ice machines are working, but no
And the
one's
gray
looking to
water,
see if
the gray
and the
water
gray water. Oh
must
yeah,
be
you can't
inspected. The
forget
gray
about that.
water.
Yeah, I make sure the hoses are running and it's properly being drained in the proper containers, and the grease, the cooking oil is put in the grease dumpsters and all that kind of stuff. But there's so many things on the grounds, the trees around the fairgrounds. I can't tell you how many branches we pointed out that, when the wind blows, that branch can fall down and hurt or kill someone. We do a lot of that work. Pretty much anything in the entertainment industry is our client. So we've got a wide range of clients, whether it be carnivals or amusement parks or state fairs. We do consulting work for a couple different states, and just anyways, there's lots of things, and we're always looking for something. Basically, I tell people when they ask what I do, I say, well, I get paid to tell people to do things that they already know they ought to do it, but they're not going to do it until somebody tells them to. So I
Yeah.
got the easiest job in the world, but actually the hardest job in the world, because trying to identify potential exposures is pretty hard.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that I'm, curious about a little bit is like, is there a point where it's too much to a certain extent? Like, in other words, if things are safe and the statistically speaking, your chance of being hurt is infinitesimally small, a lot of times you'll see they'll pass a regulation, whether it's Congress. I'm thinking about like when they did with making small children have seatbelts on an airplane instead of sitting in your lap. And they thought they were doing a good thing, but what really happened was more people drove because the cost of buying that extra seat was expensive. So more people drove, and they actually put more people in danger than they did, helping people. So, when you're looking at inspections and doing things like that, you're talking about trees or different things, there's always in a way, there's unintended consequences to a certain extent. So how do you discern whether this is really important and needs to get done? It's a real danger, quote unquote, and maybe by doing this, it might actually be causing something else to go the wrong way. So you got to kind of be on alert, I guess, all the time, or thinking about those things all the time.
Yeah. So when we do insurance audits or loss control surveys or risk assessment inspections, whatever term the various companies want to call it, we give priority codes. So if we
Okay.
see something that is extremely dangerous, well, that gets a higher priority to remedy than something like, um, say, highlighting your steps. Everybody knows they need to highlight their steps, or they should highlight their steps to identify the potential trip exposure or change in elevation. Um, it's been going on for years and years and years. It's proven that if you identify it, then um, people visually see it, and they hopefully will pick up their feet. That's not something that should be fixed immediately, as soon as possible. But now you've got something where the um, a chain is worn almost all the way through on a swing ride. That is more of an emergency. Do not operate, and
Right.
or don't use that until it's replaced. Things like that. You got to give Everything's got to have a priority. There's things that, hey, you ought to fix this. It isn't going to hurt anything, but maybe by next season you consider doing something with it. So we try to use priority codes for everything we do, and just put it in perspective. Other things, it's just, this has been an industry best proven practice, industry practice that to do this. Whether it be done immediately or just consider it. We try to share what other people are doing to potentially reduce injuries. So,
I mean, and when you look at the
that's
industry in a whole, between amusement parks, fairs, carnivals, you're talking hundreds of millions of people go there every single year, and really the number of accidents or injuries or incidents that go on are infinitesimally small. I think you touched on it before, but people don't realize. I mean, when they go to a fair, they go to a amusement park, or they go to a carnival. Yes, there's the guy who inspects the rides. That's the most obvious. But then, like you said, there's health inspectors, there's insurance company inspectors that come. In a lot of jurisdictions, you have fire marshals that come in and take a look at everything, the traffic flow and different things that go. And it does vary by state, but in general, I'll bet you there's 5, 6, 7 layers, health inspectors of people inspecting things, on whatever basis that might be. It might be weekly, it might be monthly, it might be seasonally, but there's a lot of people, and the insurance company sends out their inspectors too, if I didn't mention that. There's a lot of layers there to keep you safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And electrical inspectors,
Electrical inspectors, yep.
it's another. Yeah, they. Everybody wants to come out and take a look at something. Some states, the electrical inspector is about all you get. Other than you get a third party inspector.
And third party, I should have
So
mentioned third party inspectors on top of it to oversee sort of everyone on there. But I think that, and you really touched on it a lot, because just in your experience and your talking about it, is looking at the mechanical end of things is not really where it's at. I mean, where it's at is looking at behaviors and what people do when they're out there and all those things. That's where the biggest improvement could be made, because inspecting a machine or something like that, you can get it pretty close to zero. It already is pretty close to zero. So what improvement there is to be made, I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of trips and falls and different things out there that's where you can really make the biggest impact these days.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest impact is in the training. I like I said earlier, I just was at a little small amusement park, um, and was there for the employee training, um, and they took 3 groups of employees around, and everybody practiced operating the ride and all that. Did everything right. Every single individual um, went around and checked seat belts. They went and they started the ride. They observed the ride operate. They stopped the ride. They opened the gates. They closed the gates. Did everything they were supposed to do. And then when it got all done, I said, okay, we need to document this. Well, the employees signed off on the sheets, but the trainers didn't sign off. So I went back the next day when they were open and did a spot check, And even though we'd had a conversation, um,
They still
I
didn't
had
do
to
it.
pull the supervisors in. I said, "What happened? We talked about this. You said it were going to be done, but everything was done." And oh well, we didn't get time to do it. Well, that
You
doesn't
gotta make time.
that doesn't
You
work.
gotta make
You got to
time.
make time.
You gotta
And I
make
said,
time.
okay, so that's it. You're
And
done. Sit down. Let's do the paperwork. So, it just goes. That's why, and the owner, thanked me. That's what he hires us to do, is come in
that's
and
awesome.
find these gaps,
Yep.
because they don't want to find the gap when something happens, and they got to produce that piece of paper that's been sitting in a folder for who knows how long, that wasn't completely filled out, or they forgot to date it or whatever. So I know I talk about it all the time, but again, that's the front line. Your equipment can be in excellent shape, but if your employees are not,
Yep.
then
You're in
or your
trouble.
training is not in order, you're in trouble.
Well,
And
speaking of
unfortunately,
time,
the insurance companies need that.
and speaking of time, we've actually come to the end here. We've been talking for an hour. You didn't think you'd get through
Okay.
20 minutes. Look at you. See, I told you got plenty to talk about. I want to thank you for coming out, and thank you for all you do for safety in the industry, and read your column in Amusement Warehouse. And we'll see Avery at a fair near you, or a festival, or a amusement park. If you're safe, it's probably because of his work or a lot of his influence. Thanks so much, Avery.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.